The Mesozoic era, which lasted from about 250 to 66 million years ago, is often remembered as the Age of Dinosaurs. It was a time when giant reptiles ruled the land and filled the world with many different forms of life. But dinosaurs were not the only rulers of this era. High above the ground, another group of reptiles made the skies their home. These were the Pterosaurs, the first animals with backbones to fly by their own power. They were not dinosaurs, even though they lived side by side with them for more than 150 million years. They soared, a class of creatures that ruled the skies with razor-sharp beaks, massive wingspans, and hunting prowess that could rival any land-based carnivore. Pterosaurs belonged to their own branch of reptiles, and they became the true masters of the air. Their wings were unlike the wings of birds or bats. Instead of feathers, they had thin skin stretched across their long arms, supported by a single, very long finger. Their bones were hollow and light, which made flying possible even for the largest of them, and hunting prowess that could rival any land-based carnivore. Some could glide over long distances with little effort, while others had strong wings to flap and maneuver quickly. Over millions of years, pterosaurs changed into many different shapes and sizes. Some were as small as birds we see today, while others grew into giants with wingspans longer than a bus. It is common to think of pterosaurs as all being the same, but they were actually very different from one another. They lived in many environments, hunted in different ways, and grew into very unique forms. In this documentary, we will look at the 5 most dangerous pterosaurs. Each of them shows how nature found different solutions to the challenges of life in the air. Quetzalcoatlus, named after the Aztec feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, which means serpent of precious feathers, is a genus of Hatzeg pterosaur that lived in the Javelina Formation of Texas and the Ojo Alamo Formation of New Mexico around 68 to 66 million years ago, during the Maastrichtian stage of the late Cretaceous period. It was one of the largest animals ever known to take flight. The most remarkable feature of this pterosaur was its enormous wingspan, which is estimated to have been between 10 and 12 meters, or 33 to 39 feet. This size is comparable to the length of a small airplane or a school bus. When standing on the ground, Quetzalcoatlus reached a height of about 2.9 to 3 meters, roughly 8 to 9 feet tall. In this respect, its height has been compared to that of a modern giraffe. Despite its huge wings, the animal was relatively lightweight. Its estimated mass has been debated for many years. Earlier studies suggested a wide range, from 75 kilograms to over 500 kilograms. However, more recent and detailed research has narrowed these numbers and placed its weight at around 227 to 230 kilograms. Such a low weight for a creature of this size was possible due to its hollow bones and light skeletal structure, which reduced body mass and made flight feasible. It posed a significant threat to small animals and could have also attacked a human, though it was unlikely to have been a top predator in its ecosystem. Its attacks involved vicious pecks and forceful head shaking from its long, pointed beak, similar to a stork hunting its prey on the ground. However, it was also a terrestrial animal capable of running at high speeds to chase prey on land, and could fly away from dangerous encounters. Quetzalcoatlus belonged to the Hatzeg group of pterosaurs. Members of this family are recognized by their long, toothless beaks and stiff, elongated necks. These anatomical features strongly influenced how they lived and fed. The long beak allowed them to pick up prey efficiently, while the rigid neck helped stabilize the head during hunting and feeding. Based on fossil evidence and comparisons with modern birds such as storks and ground hornbills, scientists believe Quetzalcoatlus was most likely a terrestrial forager. The early idea that Quetzalcoatlus fed by skimming the surface of water, dragging its lower jaw to catch fish, has largely been dismissed. The structure of its jaw and skull does not match that method of feeding. In addition, its fossils are often found in inland areas rather than coastal or marine environments, which suggests it did not rely on aquatic food sources. Instead, the evidence points towards a lifestyle where it walked on land and hunted small prey. It likely fed on a wide variety of animals. These may have included small vertebrates such as lizards and mammals, as well as carrion. Juvenile dinosaurs could also have been part of its diet if they were small enough to be swallowed whole. The beak was not designed for chewing or tearing apart large prey, but rather for quickly seizing and swallowing animals that fit within its mouth. This kind of generalist feeding behavior would have given Quetzalcoatlus access to many different food sources in its environment. The overall body structure of Quetzalcoatlus was well adapted for both walking and flying. Its wings were supported by a strong humerus bone that could withstand the powerful forces involved in flight. At the same time, the long limbs and neck made it effective at moving across open plains. This combination of traits made it a versatile animal, capable of soaring through the sky or searching for prey on the ground. The question of how such a large animal managed to take off into the air has been studied extensively. As with all pterosaurs, Quetzalcoatlus took off from the ground by means distinct from those of birds. To fly, birds jump off with their two legs, and some even need to run in order to take off. Pterosaurs, on the other hand, relied on the quadrupedal launch technique. It likely pushed itself off the ground using both its strong forelimbs and hind limbs, gaining enough momentum to achieve lift. Once in the air, it could soar for long distances, taking advantage of air currents to reduce the energy cost of flying. Its long, narrow wings were well suited for gliding and sustained flight. Due to their more energy-efficient means of taking flight, the pterosaurs were not restricted to the same body size and form limitations as birds, allowing them to achieve massive body sizes, with their flight muscles being 50 kilograms, making up 20 to 25% of the total body mass of the largest Hatzegopteryx. Although it was a giant, Quetzalcoatlus was not invulnerable. Its hollow bones, while useful for keeping weight low, also made its skeleton fragile compared to more robust animals. Injuries to the wings or limbs could have been dangerous. On the ground, it may have faced threats from large predators of the late Cretaceous, such as Tyrannosaurus rex. However, its large size would have discouraged many potential attackers, and it is likely that adult Quetzalcoatlus faced few natural predators. Information about its lifespan remains uncertain. Fossil evidence does not provide direct clues about how long these animals lived. Estimates are made by comparing Quetzalcoatlus to modern reptiles and large birds. Based on this approach, some scientists suggest it could have lived for 25 to 30 years, but they were also considered reptiles which lived to 40. This, however, is only an approximation and cannot be confirmed without clearer fossil data. Quetzalcoatlus represents one of the most extreme examples of flight in the history of life on Earth. Its size exceeded that of any living bird, and yet it managed to fly effectively. This was made possible through a series of specialized adaptations, including lightweight bones, powerful flight muscles, and a body design optimized for both aerial and terrestrial life. Its existence demonstrates the extraordinary range of evolutionary solutions that allowed pterosaurs to dominate the skies for millions of years. The fossil record of Quetzalcoatlus is incomplete, but the remains that have been found have provided important insights. The first fossils were discovered in Texas in the early 1970s. These included wing bones that immediately showed the enormous size of the animal. Since then, additional material has helped paleontologists reconstruct its anatomy and lifestyle, though many details are still debated. Much like the mythological figure, this pterosaur has continued to inspire interest and fascination among both scientists and the public. The study of Quetzalcoatlus also contributes to broader questions about flight in large animals. By examining its structure, researchers gain a better understanding of the physical limits of flight and the strategies that enabled such enormous creatures to take to the skies. These insights are not only valuable for paleontology, but also for biomechanics and the study of living animals. Although it disappeared with the mass extinction event at the end of the Cretaceous, Quetzalcoatlus remains one of the most striking examples of prehistoric life. For scientists, it continues to serve as a subject of study that challenges assumptions about what is possible in nature. Quetzalcoatlus illustrates the remarkable diversity of life during the Cretaceous and the extraordinary adaptations that allowed pterosaurs to thrive for millions of years. From the vast skies above North America, we now shift to a very different world. During the late Cretaceous, what is now Romania was not part of the great continents we recognize today. Instead, it lay scattered across a shallow sea, broken into islands. Among them was Hațeg Island, a landscape of forests, river valleys, and coastlines, cut off from the large land masses that gave rise to giants like Tyrannosaurus. Life here followed its own rules. Animals shrank to fit the limits of their environment, and predators adapted to the absence of the towering theropods that elsewhere ruled the land. Into this isolated stage stepped a creature that defied convention: Hatzegopteryx, a pterosaur whose power and presence made it the unquestioned master of its world. At first glance, Hatzegopteryx shared the same grand dimensions as its relatives. Its wings stretched an astonishing 10 to 12 meters from tip to tip, rivaling the size of Quetzalcoatlus. But size alone does not define character, and in this case, the similarities ended quickly. Where Quetzalcoatlus carried a frame engineered for distance and efficiency, Hatzegopteryx bore the marks of a predator shaped by isolation. Its bones were not the delicate scaffolding of a creature built for endless soaring. They were dense, thick-walled, and reinforced. The lightness typical of pterosaurs was traded for raw strength. This shift in design meant it weighed more heavily than its kin, but it also meant that, on the ground, it could deliver and withstand forces that would have shattered other pterosaurs. The skull was its most striking feature. Stretching close to 2.5 meters, it rivaled the body length of many of the animals it preyed upon. Unlike the thin, fragile skulls of other pterosaurs, this one was solid, compact, and surprisingly durable. Combined with a short, reinforced neck, it created an image less of a soaring flyer and more of a terrestrial enforcer. The anatomy pointed to a method of hunting that relied not on speed or aerial dives, but on overwhelming power. A downward strike of that immense beak, driven by the torque of its neck muscles, could deliver a killing blow in an instant. This anatomy makes sense only when seen through the lens of Hatzeg's ecosystem. The island lacked the apex predators of other continents. Here, there were no tyrannosaurs, no abelisaurs, no towering carnivores to challenge for dominance. Instead, the herbivores were smaller. Sauropods, usually the long-necked giants of the Cretaceous, existed here in dwarf forms, no larger than elephants. Ornithopods, stocky plant eaters, moved in herds across the plains, but they too were reduced in scale compared to their relatives abroad. These animals were large enough to provide a meal, but not so massive that they exceeded the reach of Hatzegopteryx's power. On this island, Hatzegopteryx filled the role of top predator, something almost unheard of among pterosaurs elsewhere. While most of its relatives were vulnerable on the ground, always wary of the great theropods, here it faced no such threat. It could stride across the landscape on its long limbs, its head towering above the undergrowth, watching for movement. When prey was spotted, it would not need the speed of a pursuit hunter. A single decisive strike from its heavy skull could incapacitate smaller dinosaurs or crush through the body of a fleeing herbivore. Its toothless beak, while lacking cutting edges, was perfectly suited to seizing and swallowing prey whole. The efficiency of this method cannot be overstated. On islands, where resources are limited, predators must make every hunt count. Chasing prey wastes energy. Prolonged battles risk injury. Hatzegopteryx's anatomy offered a solution. It could ambush, strike with sudden force, and consume quickly. This approach minimized effort and maximized survival. In doing so, it avoided the fragility that haunted many other giant flyers, whose thin bones could snap under stress. But Hatzegopteryx was not without its limits. Its body size was also massive, with some reconstructions suggesting it weighed 200 to 250 kilograms. Its heavy build reduced its skill as a long-distance traveler. While still capable of flight, it was less suited for gliding across oceans or spanning continents. Its wings could carry it between valleys, coastlines, and roosting sites, but it was the ground where it reigned. What might have been a disadvantage in another setting was here irrelevant. Hatzeg Island did not demand great journeys. It demanded control over a confined world, and Hatzegopteryx was the creature evolution equipped for that exact role. The image that emerges is not of a fragile flying reptile at the mercy of its environment, but of a dominant hunter unlike any other. Its sheer size alone would have been enough to intimidate, but combined with its reinforced anatomy, it became nearly unchallenged. The story of Hatzegopteryx is also the story of how isolation shapes life. Islands strip away excess, forcing species into niches they might never fill elsewhere. Large animals shrink, small animals sometimes grow, and predators adapt to roles otherwise occupied by different lineages. In this crucible of limitation, Hatzegopteryx did not become a weak shadow of its mainland relatives. Instead, it became something new, a pterosaur that sacrificed the freedom of endless flight to gain supremacy on the ground. Fossils can only tell us so much. We do not know the exact length of its lifespan, the details of its nesting grounds, or the rhythms of its movements across the island. But the evidence we do have paints a picture of a predator that dominated not by speed nor by stealth, but by sheer, overwhelming power. In Hatzeg's isolated ecosystems, it was both a symbol of adaptation and a constant threat. From the isolated forests and rivers of Hatzeg Island, the story shifts to a very different stage. Far across the ocean, the ancient skies stretched wide over open plains and inland seas, where conditions shaped another of the great flyers, of the late Cretaceous. In the late Cretaceous, the land that is now Canada looked very different. Wide plains stretched out, dotted with forests, rivers, and lakes. The climate brought warm summers and colder seasons, making life here more demanding than in many other parts of the world. Among the animals of this northern landscape was one of the largest flying creatures ever known, Cryodrakon. Cryodrakon was a member of the Azhdarchid family, the same group that included Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx. But while it shared their general feature, long necks, toothless beaks, and wide wings, Cryodrakon was adapted to its own environment. It was not as heavy and powerful as Hatzegopteryx, and it was not as specialized for endless soaring as Quetzalcoatlus. Instead, Cryodrakon found balance. It was large and imposing, but also versatile. It could walk on land with confidence and take to the air when needed. In a world where predators like Albertosaurus were a constant threat, this adaptability was vital. The size of Cryodrakon was impressive. On the ground, it stood around 5 meters tall, about the height of a giraffe. Its wings spread up to 10 meters, or about 33 feet, comparable to that of a small aircraft. It was among the largest creatures ever to fly. For years, its fossils were confused with Quetzalcoatlus, but closer study showed subtle differences. The bones of the neck and limbs were shaped differently, pointing to a slightly different lifestyle. Its weight was probably around 250 kilograms, light enough for flight, but still strong enough to walk on the ground as a predator. The head and beak were its main weapons. Like other Azhdarchids, it had no teeth. Instead, its beak was long, sharp, and designed for quick strikes. It was not a creature that relied on crushing strength like Hatzegopteryx. Cryodrakon hunted with speed and precision. It could snatch small animals in a single motion, dinosaurs no larger than a human, as well as lizards, mammals, and perhaps even fish near the water's edge. Its long, stiff neck lets it reach down without losing balance, giving it an advantage when stalking on land. On the ground, Cryodrakon walked on all fours. It folded its wings close to its body, using both its long legs and the strength of its forelimbs to move. This gave it a steady gait, and combined with its height, it could look out over much of the landscape. But the sky was where Cryodrakon showed its greatest skill. Its wings were not designed for fast flapping like a bird's. Instead, it depended on soaring. Rising air currents lifted it high above the plains, where it could travel long distances with little effort. From above, it could scan for prey, search for carcasses, or move safely away from predators on the ground. This ability to cover large areas was essential in a land where food was not always easy to find, especially during the colder seasons. Unlike Hatzegopteryx, which ruled an island without competition, Cryodrakon lived alongside many dangerous animals. But its advantage was the ability to escape. A powerful launch from its forelimbs could lift it into the air, out of reach of jaws and claws. Once airborne, it was almost untouchable, gliding across vast distances where few could follow. Its role in the ecosystem was flexible. It was a hunter, but it may also have scavenged. The carcass of a hadrosaur left behind by a tyrannosaur would have been a valuable resource. With its height and reach, Cryodrakon could feed on remains that smaller animals could not access. Its size alone would have been enough to drive away lesser scavengers. In this way, it may have combined active hunting with opportunistic feeding, adjusting to what the environment provided. Life in northern Cretaceous Canada was shaped by seasons. In summer, prey would have been more common, with herds and smaller animals abundant. But in the colder months, resources became scarcer. Cryodrakon's ability to glide over large territories meant it could follow food sources, moving between plains, river valleys, and forests. This mobility helped it survive in a world where staying in one place was often not enough. When compared with its relatives, Cryodrakon stands out for its balance. We do not yet know how long it lived, how it raised its young, or how it nested. But the fossils tell us enough to see its place in the ancient world. It was a predator that did not rely only on size or power. It thrived because it could do many things well. It could glide for hours, stalk quietly on land, and strike with a beak built for precision. Cryodrakon's story adds another piece to the larger picture of pterosaur life. It shows how these flying reptiles were not limited to one lifestyle. Within the same family, some became island predators, some became long-distance travelers, and some, like Cryodrakon, became balanced hunters of open plains and forests. Each is uniquely adapted to its environment. On the late Cretaceous plains of Canada, Cryodrakon was a constant presence. And in the grand story of prehistoric life, it was one of the final great rulers of the skies. The wide northern skies of Canada tell one story, but the ancient world was vast, and its creatures were never shaped in just one way. On the other side of the globe, the landscapes were dominated by warm seas and scattered coastlines, where evolution gave rise to another great flyer. In this setting, the rules of survival were different, and so too was the form that mastery of the air would take. Thapunngaka was the largest known pterosaur from Australia. It lived during the early Cretaceous period, around 105 million years ago, and its discovery added an important chapter to the understanding of pterosaur diversity in Gondwana. The fossil evidence of this species was first found in Queensland in a marine sediment formation known as the Toolbuck Formation. This site is well known for preserving a range of marine life, and the remains of Thapunngaka were identified from a partial jaw. Although the fossil material is limited, it has allowed scientists to reconstruct the approximate size, anatomy, and lifestyle of this remarkable pterosaur. Estimates suggest that Thapunngaka had a wingspan between 5.83 and 9.47 meters, with the more probable range being around 6 to 7 meters. This made it a very large flying reptile, although not as large as the giant Azhdarchids of the Northern Hemisphere. Its wings, like those of all pterosaurs, were formed from membranes of skin and muscle stretched across an elongated fourth finger. The lightweight, hollow bone structure of pterosaurs made flight possible despite their large size. Thapunngaka, although smaller than some of the largest pterosaurs, was still among the biggest flying animals of its time in Australia. The most distinctive feature of Thapunngaka was its mouth. Unlike the toothless beaks of many other pterosaurs, this species had a jaw lined with about 40 sharp, pointed teeth. These teeth were well adapted for catching and gripping prey. The shape and arrangement suggest a specialization for feeding on fish, consistent with the marine environment in which it lived. Along with the teeth, the jaws were marked by prominent bony crests. These crests may have played a role in streamlining the jaws in flight, or could have been used in display or recognition between individuals. The combination of sharp teeth and prominent crests sets Thapunngaka apart from many other pterosaurs and emphasizes its role as a specialized aquatic predator. Its very name reflects this adaptation. Thapunngaka means spear mouth, a direct reference to its pointed, tooth-filled jaws. This was an animal designed to hunt in a specific way, relying on its aerial abilities and specialized mouth to capture large, slippery fish. Its diet was likely composed mostly of predatory fish that thrived in the seas of the early Cretaceous, around what is now Queensland. The Toolbuck Formation has yielded fossils of many marine organisms, and these provide context for the prey available to Thapunngaka. Large fish, smaller marine reptiles, and other sea creatures would have been abundant in the warm, shallow seas. The specialization of Thapunngaka's teeth shows that it was well adapted to thrive in this ecosystem. As a pterosaur, Thapunngaka was part of a group of reptiles that had conquered the skies long before birds evolved to fill those roles. Pterosaurs were incredibly diverse, ranging from small species with wingspans of less than a meter to giants spanning over 10 meters. Thapunngaka fits within the group known as Anhangarids, a family of toothed pterosaurs often associated with fish-eating habits. Anhangarids are recognized by their long jaws, filled with interlocking teeth, and often large head crests. Fossil remains of this group have been found in Europe, South America, and Asia, making Thapunngaka an important discovery that extended their range into Australia. This confirmed that Australia was home to some of the same major pterosaur groups found in other parts of the world. The anatomy of Thapunngaka indicates a life adapted to soaring flight over marine environments. Its large wings would have allowed it to glide efficiently, conserving energy as it searched for prey. Once prey was spotted, it could have swooped down, using its jaws and teeth to seize fish near the surface of the water. This mode of hunting is supported by the fact that its fossils were preserved in marine deposits. Unlike some pterosaurs thought to feed on land, Thapunngaka's teeth and environment both point toward a specialized piscivorous or fish-eating lifestyle. Although it was large, Thapunngaka was not invulnerable. Its reliance on aquatic hunting would have exposed it to threats from marine predators that shared its environment. While no direct fossil evidence exists showing Thapunngaka as prey, it lived in seas that contained large marine reptiles and predatory fish. These animals could have posed a risk, especially to younger or smaller individuals. Opportunistic predators may have attacked pterosaurs when they entered the water, or were resting on the surface. The fragile, lightweight nature of pterosaur bones also made them more vulnerable to injury compared to other reptiles. One of the biggest questions about pterosaurs, including Thapunngaka, is how long they lived. The fossil record provides very limited information about their lifespans. Unlike trees, which preserve annual growth rings, or some reptiles whose bones retain clear markers of age, pterosaur bones do not give straightforward answers. Estimates are often based on comparisons to modern reptiles or birds. Large reptiles today can live for several decades, sometimes more than 40 years. Birds, depending on their size, also show a wide range of lifespans. Applying these comparisons, some researchers suggest large pterosaurs may have lived 20 to 30 years or more, but this remains speculation. For Thapunngaka specifically, there is no direct fossil evidence that reveals its age at death or overall lifespan. The rarity of Thapunngaka fossils highlights another challenge in studying pterosaurs. Because their bones were hollow and thin-walled, they did not preserve well. Most pterosaur discoveries consist of fragmentary remains, often flattened or incomplete. For Thapunngaka, only a partial jaw has been found, yet this single fossil provided enough unique characteristics to identify it as a new genus and species. This demonstrates how even small pieces of evidence can greatly expand scientific knowledge about prehistoric life. It also means that much about Thapunngaka's anatomy, behavior, and ecology remains uncertain until more fossils are discovered. Despite these gaps, Thapunngaka remains an important species for understanding pterosaur diversity. Its discovery confirmed that Australia was home to some of the largest flying reptiles, and that toothed pterosaurs were widespread across Gondwana. It also provided evidence of how specialized pterosaurs could become in adapting to their environment. With its long, toothed jaws, prominent crests, and large wings, Thapunngaka was well suited to dominate the skies over the shallow Cretaceous seas of Australia. The end of Thapunngaka came as part of the larger extinction that wiped out all pterosaurs about 66 million years ago. While Thapunngaka itself lived earlier in the Cretaceous and may have disappeared before that final event, all pterosaurs were gone by the close of the era. Their extinction opened ecological space that would eventually be filled by birds and bats, the only flying vertebrates alive today. No flying animal since has equaled the size of the largest pterosaurs, making Thapunngaka and its relatives unique examples of evolution, pushing the limits of flight. Unlike toothless pterosaurs that relied on different feeding strategies, Thapunngaka was a dedicated piscivore, an animal built for seizing fish. Its remains, though incomplete, represent a major discovery for Australian paleontology and continue to shape our understanding of how pterosaurs adapted and thrived in different parts of the world. Among the most iconic flying reptiles of the Mesozoic era, Pteranodon stands out as a marvel of prehistoric aviation. Often mistaken for a dinosaur, this pterosaur soared above ancient seas with a wingspan that rivaled modern aircraft, with a wingspan that varied from 7 to 9 meters, or roughly 23 to 30 feet. Despite its impressive size, it was remarkably lightweight. Estimates suggest it weighed only between 15.8 and 25 kilograms, or about 35 to 55 pounds. This extreme lightness, relative to its size, was a critical adaptation that allowed it to take to the skies. Its bones, like those of most pterosaurs, were hollow and pneumatic, reducing weight while still providing structural strength. These anatomical traits made Pteranodon a specialist in long distance, allowing it to soar gracefully over coastal waters during the hunt for fish. According to the etymology study, the name Pteranodon is derived from the Greek words pteron, which means wing, and adon, which means tooth. This linguistic significance emphasizes how the creature's feeding habits were influenced by its toothless beak, a characteristic unique to flying reptiles. Since its first description by Othniel Charles Marsh in 1876, Pteranodon's name has changed in tandem with scientific understanding. Its extraordinary wingspan and cranial crest were the main focus of early interpretations, which resulted in a variety of cultural interpretations of its appearance. When compared to other pterosaur genera, the name Pteranodon highlights the diversity within the genus by specifically addressing its lengthy cranial crest, which differs among species. Its diet primarily consisted of fish and scavenged carcasses, showcasing its sharp sense of smell that enabled it to locate prey from significant distances. Pteranodon behavior included quick plunges and ascents, which not just aided in hunting, but additionally improved its evasion tactics against predators. Its fragile form, although limiting its combat effectiveness, made it exceptionally agile, a critical adaptation for survival in a dynamic ecosystem. Regarding Pteranodon ecology, these reptiles played a crucial role as both predators and scavengers, contributing to the balance of their environment. Pteranodon also possessed strong intelligence comparable to some birds, evidenced by large cerebral and optic lobes, and a large cerebellum, which suggests good coordination and balance for flight and hunting. Its exceptional eyesight, with well-developed optic lobes for rapid processing, was crucial for spotting prey. The inner ear's large semicircular canals also indicated excellent balance for aerial maneuvers. One of the most distinctive features of Pteranodon was its short tail and prominent cranial crest. Unlike some earlier pterosaurs, which retained long, bony tails for stabilization, Pteranodon had evolved a much shorter tail, relying instead on its large head crest and advanced wing structure for balance and control in the air. The crests varied in shape and size, with some believed to show differences between males and females. While their exact purpose is still debated, many paleontologists suggest the crests may have served as display structures for sexual selection or as aerodynamic stabilizers during flight. Pteranodon was completely toothless. This distinguished it from many other pterosaurs that retained rows of teeth for grasping prey. Instead, its long, narrow beak functioned as a precision tool for catching and swallowing fish. The lack of teeth made its skull lighter, which was advantageous for efficient flight. The beak was long and pointed, perfectly adapted to seize slippery fish from the surface of the water or just below it. The lifestyle of Pteranodon was highly specialized. Fossil evidence shows that it lived in marine environments and was almost certainly a piscivore, feeding primarily on fish. Its remains have been found in formations that represent ancient seaways, particularly the western interior seaway that once divided North America. This inland sea stretched from what is now the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean, providing an expansive habitat rich in marine life. The abundance of Pteranodon fossils in these marine deposits leaves little doubt about its ecological role as an oceanic flyer. The ability to soar efficiently was central to Pteranodon's survival. Its large wings were ideally suited for dynamic soaring, using wind currents and thermals to cover vast distances with minimal energy expenditure. This adaptation allowed it to patrol wide areas of ocean in search of food. Its wings were long and narrow, optimized for gliding rather than rapid flapping flight. This efficiency meant that Pteranodon could remain airborne for extended periods, a vital trait for a marine hunter. While Pteranodon was a predator in its own right, it was also vulnerable to larger marine animals. Fossil evidence provides direct proof of this. Bite marks on Pteranodon bones indicate that sharks attacked them. In addition, the remains of Pteranodon have been discovered in the stomach contents of large marine reptiles, such as mosasaurs and plesiosaurs, confirming that it was preyed upon. This dual role as both predator and prey highlights its place within the complex marine ecosystems of the late Cretaceous. The question of lifespan for Pteranodon, as with most pterosaurs, remains unresolved. No direct fossil evidence provides an answer. Estimates are speculative, often based on comparisons with modern birds and reptiles of similar size. Some scientists suggest Pteranodon may have lived for 1 to 2 decades, possibly longer, but without growth rings or other age markers preserved in the fossils, it is impossible to be certain. This lack of information is a common challenge in paleontology, where soft tissues and biological markers rarely survive fossilization. One of the striking aspects of Pteranodon's anatomy was the extreme difference between its wingspan and its body mass. A wingspan of up to 9 meters combined with a body weight under 25 kilograms is a ratio unmatched by most modern animals. This demonstrates how finely tuned its body was for flight. Pteranodon fossils are among the most common large pterosaur remains found to date, particularly in North America. This abundance has allowed paleontologists to study it in greater detail than many other species. The extensive fossil record shows a wide geographic distribution, confirming that it thrived in the warm, shallow seas of the Cretaceous. The presence of large colonies suggests that it may have had complex social behavior, at least during breeding seasons, though direct evidence of nesting remains scarce. Despite its prevalence in the fossil record, many aspects of Pteranodon's biology remain unclear. The function of its cranial crest, the specifics of its breeding habits, and the details of its growth and development are all still subjects of research. What is clear, however, is that Pteranodon was a dominant aerial predator of its time, perfectly adapted to its oceanic environment. What made Pteranodon remarkable was not a powerful bite or an intimidating presence on land, but rather its mastery of the skies over the sea. Its ability to glide effortlessly over vast distances, combined with its specialized piscivorous diet, positioned it as one of the most successful flying reptiles of the late Cretaceous. In the end, the story of the great pterosaurs is one of wonder, mystery, and imagination. These giants remind us of a time when the skies were not empty, but alive with wings so vast they cast shadows over entire landscapes. They were creatures that combined power, grace, and adaptability in ways no other animals have ever matched. Some were hunters on the ground, towering over their surroundings, while others were masters of the oceans, diving for prey with speed and precision. What makes them so fascinating is not just their size, but their variety. Each one carved out its own role in the prehistoric world, shaping the ecosystems around them. Today, we only know them from scattered bones, fragile fossils preserved by chance. Yet even from these fragments, a picture emerges of a world far more alive and astonishing than we often imagine. A world where the land, sea, and air were dominated by forms so strange they almost feel unreal. And still, as science uncovers more of their secrets, one thing remains certain. These creatures spark something deep within us. They remind us that the Earth has carried countless stories before our own. Stories written in wingspans wider than a bus, in beaks sharp as spears, and in the quiet mystery of fossils buried for millions of years. The pterosaurs are gone, but their legacy remains. They weren't just majestic gliders. They were apex aerial predators that dominated the skies for over 150 million years. Their evolutionary adaptations made them some of the most dangerous creatures to ever take flight. So next time you look up at the sky, imagine the shadow of a Quetzalcoatlus passing overhead, and be glad you're not a small dinosaur.